So I figured out what I would do is break this down for you and stay on the screen again, just so that you have a bit of a refresher on Plato's metaphysics and his epistemology, the connections between us, the knower, and that perfect truth, the known. Right. So more or less, what Plato is getting at there is that these forms or essences or ideas are that which make a thing a thing. And I've given you several examples of this. Um, I kind of like the 3D printer example, right? It's the idea of the thing which begets the thing. If you type into a 3D printer, insert like the essence of the thing, the idea of the thing, the specs of a thing, the schematics of a thing, what you get is a copy of those schematics or those specs. Right? But what Plato's claiming is that this too in nature is the case, right? It's the idea, the essence, the form of tree that makes a tree, and the particular, okay, back on the screen, and the particular tree is just an imperfect copy of this essence. That's the nature of this truth. Like I've got here, the forms are perfect, they're universal, and they're immutable. What a tree is what a tree is today versus 100 years ago, 1,000 years, 2,500 years, what have you. There is a permanence to this abstract truth, right? What Plato uses quite often are mathematical examples. A triangle, right, is what it is, and this is, frankly, not a triangle. It's a representation that's supposed to call to mind the essence of triangularity, right? So what Plato wants to claim is that this truth exists independently in another realm from this world of appearances. Right? When we look at a particular thing, all we ever actually see, right, with our senses, with our bodily faculties, is a series of accidental attributes. Which I had my cat here to show you because he's huge, he's black, he's whiny, he whines for food all the time, right? He's a he, etc. I would call him morbidly obese, right? Even we've got him on a diet, it's improving, that sort of thing. But everything I've just told you about our cat Hugo, right, is accidental, right? He could still be a cat, and all of those things, the black, the obese, the whining for food, what have you, could be false, and he could still be a cat, right? So for Plato, when we actually intuit a thing, it's these essences, these forms that are what make that thing what it is. But this leads to sort of a problem, right? This is the connection between Plato's metaphysics and his epistemology. When we encounter these objects with our bodily senses, if all we get all the time that we are the combination of body and soul, which Plato mentions, is the nature of a living thing. So is insofar as we're alive and experiencing, all experience, this embodied experience gives us are these accidental attributes. We never come across the perfection of the forms in experience with our senses while we're embedded in the world as this composite of body and soul. It's only the mind or the soul that is able to intuit these forms. Just like with the triangle here, triangularity is an abstract notion, right? All we ever see is my sort of crappy representation of a triangle here, right? So, right, for Plato, nothing in experience is sufficient to beget a knowledge of these forms. So where do we get it? This is the epistemological dilemma that he is framing for us. Well, we are this composite being of body and soul, and while the body comes with senses, desires, and is mortal, it's basically our meat suit that we walk around in, our soul is, according to Plato, immortal. he gave us that very, very strange argument for immortality, basically an argument from motion on page, give me a second, 29 to 30. And like I say, I'm not asking you questions about that argument. It's a weird argument. He's got better arguments for that. In fact, the argument from recollection is a little bit more compelling, right? Since we actually do have access to and utilize these forms or essences on a regular basis. We recognize chairs as chairs, tables as tables, trees as trees, cats as cats, dogs as dogs. Even though these particular things given to you by your senses, right, are always particular and not sufficiently alike to actually warrant a unifying concept, right, we do make use of these forms on a regular basis. Where did we come to a foggy knowledge of these forms? Well, Plato claims from before. Right? These ideas are innate in the Meno, which is part of your Five Dialogues book. He actually encounters a slave boy with no knowledge of mathematics, and through a series of prompting questions, he prompts this slave boy with no knowledge or training in mathematics to, through the exercise of this reasoning part of the soul, solve a fairly complicated mathematical problem. So, it's like ragu, it's in there, right? Already, we are born with some sort of foggy intuition of these forms. So, for Plato's argument to stand, we must know these from before. We have these ideas innately in us. The problem is that the body and the senses and desires and our mortality and our embeddedness in this realm of appearances is, well, it's very distracting. It's very distracting. So, right, basically what Plato claims that our position is, if we want a knowledge of this truth, we have to pay heed to and cultivate this ability to think, to exercise reason in our soul, and recall through this theory of recollection that which we know from before. So for Plato, a couple of interesting features. Right? First off, there's nothing new under the sun. There's nothing new under the sun. All learning is recollection. Right? All genuine learning is learning about these forms, and the only way that we have any access to them whatsoever is because we had an intuition of these forms before our soul joined our body. So the task for the human being is to recall what we already know. Right? The other feature of this is that these things are not really what they are. Your chair is not a chair. Your table's not a table, my cat's not a cat. It's just a copy or an imitation of these perfect forms. So the philosopher's task is to exercise our distinctive reason through this process of recollection, inferring from the particular to the universal. Right? That's the philosopher's task. That's how we come to a better knowledge of the forms. Now, the next part of this question asks you to discuss how this argument presents love as a beneficial sort of madness. That is, what is special about love in the context of Plato's metaphysics and epistemology. Right? So the question is, okay, fine, this is the metaphysics, this is the epistemology, this is our situation as embodied beings, we have this soul with the pie chart and all of that. Right? What does any of this have to do with love? Well, in the Phaedrus, on page 38 to 39, and these are the relevant passages, so I'll just quote them for you. right? Rather than give the answer to the question away, right? This is the story of before we were embodied, when we were soul only, existing in this realm of the forms, intuiting and giving us this knowledge, which we then recall. He claims, right below 250b on page 38, justice and self-control do not shine out through their images down here, and neither do the other objects of the soul's admiration. The senses are so murky that only a few people are able to make out with difficulty the original of the original of the likenesses they encounter here. But beauty, and you see there's something special about beauty, was radiant to see at the time when our souls, along with the glorious chorus, saw that blessed and spectacular vision, and were ushered into the mystery that we may rightly call the most blessed of all. Over the page, towards the bottom. That was the ultimate vision, and we saw it in pure light because we were pure ourselves, not buried in this thing we are carrying around now, which we call a body, locked in it like an oyster in a shell. Well, that was for all that was for love of memory. That made me stretch out my speech in longing for the past. Now, beauty, as I said, was radiant among the other objects, and now that we have come down here to the realm of the appearances, we grasp it sparkling through the clearest of our senses. Vision, of course, is the sharpest of our bodily senses, although it does not see wisdom. It would awaken a terribly powerful love if an image of wisdom came through our sight as clearly as beauty does, and the same goes for other objects of inspired love. But now, beauty alone has the privilege to be the most clearly visible and most loved. Of course, a man who is initiated long ago or has become defiled is not to be moved abruptly from here to a vision of beauty itself when he sees what we call beauty here. So instead, gazing at the latter reverently, he surrenders to pleasure and sets out in the manner of a four-footed beast, eager to make babies and wallowing in vice. He goes up after a natural pleasure too, without a trace of fear or shame. See, what I've given you is sort of the key passage there. Right? So if our task is to go from particular to universal, exercising our distinctive rationality through this process of recollection, and the senses generally don't help us out with this project, it's all inferring from particular crappy triangles to the essence, the notion of triangularity, or inferring from particular activities of particular people in particular situations, to the notion of justice, because think about it, we don't actually see justice. We just see particular people choosing and doing particular things, and then intellectually, through the use of our reason, Plato would say through recollection, we would judge or recall the perfect notion of justice and apply it to this particular situation. Right? Well, beauty is special. It's one of the forms, it's one of the big forms. The good, the true, and the beautiful are the three big ones that Plato isolates in this dialogue. Right? And the good, justice, piety, virtue, and the like, we don't actually see. The true, mathematical truth, triangularity, the essence of a particular thing, treeness as opposed to this particular tree, right? We don't actually see. It's a purely intellectual exercise to get us back up there. But our senses, as he's just told us on page 38 and 39 of your text, right, actually bloody well intuit beauty in this world. So there's sort of a natural marriage of body and soul in the apprehension of beauty. Right? But that last section that I read, where somebody who's become defiled or did not get a good view of beauty in that other realm, right, misinterprets the beauty and the love that it awakens in him. This is why we get so messed up about beauty. Misinterprets that as an object of physical bodily desire. Right? So rather than gratifying the soul, we gratify the meat suit. Right? This oyster shell that we're wrapped up in. Right? In the Phaedo, he calls the body the prison of the soul. Right? This is something Nietzsche is going to become critical of later. But nonetheless, right, beauty then shows itself to be the most powerful recollection tool that we have. We can infer from a particular beautiful body, a particular beauty of a sunset, right, or the beauty that emerges from a just political system or what have you. We can infer from that beauty of this particular thing that we can actually sense back to beauty as it really is. And when we recall one of the forms, they're all kind of one. All of them come flooding back to memory. Right? So that's one of the things that it justifies love, right? Because we've discussed on page 18 of your text, he defines eros, right? Love, as the unreasoning desire that overpowers a person's considered impulse to do right and is driven to take pleasure in what? Beauty. Right? It's force reinforced by beautiful bodies, takes its name from the word for force, which is called eros. So, eros, this concept that was so heavily criticized in the first two speeches, the one by Lysias and Socrates' first speech, becomes that part of the soul, right? It relates to that desirous part of the soul. It's that soul part of the soul's desire for beauty as it really is. So, how is love a beneficial sort of madness? Well, we get all messed up. This part of desirous, unruly part of our soul gets so messed up when it sees a beautiful body in this world because it prompts sort of a foggy, misinterpreted recollection of the essence of beauty. So, the remaining task for Plato is to basically tell us how to manage this apprehension of beauty in itself.